Thanks for joining us here on 9 News Plus. I'm Chris Beyond. Recent high-profile shootings have brought up a term that you've probably heard a lot of in the last few weeks and perhaps the last few months, even the last few years. Stand your ground. So what exactly is a stand your ground law? How does it vary between federal laws as well as state laws? And how could it perhaps impact some of those high-profile cases we've talked about lately? We're now joined by 9 News legal expert Whitney Traylor for a bit more on stand your ground laws. And Whitney, could you just start off with a bit of a broad perspective, a broad overview? What exactly is a stand your ground law?
The stand your ground law, this stems out of essentially self-defense types of notion. And there's really three concepts: self-defense, the KUSA doctrine, and then stand your ground. And so self-defense, really the laws throughout the state say that you have a duty or a right to defend yourself, and the level of that you exercise that defense, how aggressive you can be, can you use lethal force, those kind of things, that depends on state to state. Some states say you have to retreat as far as you can. So if you can safely retreat, you're required to do so. So the self-defense really revolves around proportionality, was it necessary, the level of force, all these types of things. Well, that notion was expanded to what we call the castle doctrine, which is your home is your castle. And so in the castle doctrine, it says if somebody's coming to use force on you in your home, you don't have a duty to retreat, and you can defend your house, essentially, even if you can get out safely. Some states say you have to retreat as far as you possibly can, and if you can't retreat anymore, then you can use force. But the castle doctrine says you don't have to retreat, you can defend yourself. Then the stand your ground law takes that even further and says you don't have a duty to retreat even in a public place. So stand your ground. If you came at me aggressive and I feared for my life and we were in a public place, I don't have a duty, even if I can run off or get into a safe place, I can defend myself even in that public place. And that's where the stand your ground comes in, and it becomes more complex and nuanced in our society because we have so many more guns on the street. And now if people have a right and they say, I feared for my life, it's sort of like the wild, wild west. And so there's a lot of criticism, and you're seeing this now with this recent shooting. Somebody pulled in the wrong driveway. Somebody got in the wrong car. The kid just rang the doorbell, right? And literally people are shooting. And so we're going to see folks using the stand your ground law more and more as we have this proliferation of guns on the streets.
So to be clear, the stand your ground, the castle doctrine, are these federal or are these state by state? How does this work?
These are state by state. So about 28 states have a stand your ground statute that allows you to use lethal force if you're in self-defense. And now other states have, like Colorado, it's not in a statute, but the courts have said that you can stand your ground, that you don't have a duty to retreat. So some states...
Precedent.
Yes, exactly right, precedent. Some states actually codified it in their state statutes, and then others, the case law, there's precedent establishing it.
Is it politically run? So, for example, the redder the state, is there more stand your ground laws, and the bluer the state, perhaps? Is that how it works, kind of?
I don't know if I would say necessarily across the board, but generally speaking, yes. The more red states tend to have stronger stand your ground laws. And like Florida, for example, they've taken it to another level that says, look, if it's self-defense, we can't even prosecute when you claim self-defense. So they've given like an extra layer of protection on the stand your ground. And what the statistics bear out, though, is that where there are states with stand your ground laws, the homicide rate goes up. And there's also a racial component. And that is when it's a white person asserting the stand your ground against a black person. The statistics show that there's almost always a verdict for the defense, if you will, a verdict for that white person. When it's a black person shooting a white person, it's almost exclusively, it's 10 times less likely or more likely that black person will be prosecuted. So there's statistics that show there's racial disparities in this issue as well.
And that's of course coming to light now with the Ralph Yarl, the 16-year-old boy who was shot when he was ringing the wrong doorbell.
Yes.
I believe it was near Kansas City where that took place. I guess when it comes to this, one of the things that immediately comes to my mind when it comes to a question with stand your ground laws is how do you determine self-defense? Isn't there a big gray area there?
Well, it's subjective, and the question is, did the person have a reasonable fear of their life being in danger? And a lot of these cases, the Kansas City case, he just literally rang the doorbell. So that man who shot and who's now been charged has not asserted the stand your ground yet, but that may be a case. And the question is going to be exactly what you asked. What was his basis for believing his life was in fear, and is it a reasonable basis? And I have to, based on the facts as I understand him, literally he just rang the doorbell, which is the purpose of a doorbell, to be rung, if you will. So if that was all, then the stand your ground should not apply. There was no reasonable threat. So yeah, it is subjective, but there has to be some basis for believing that you're in harm's way.
You mentioned at the start here that there's been a bit more questioning about these stand your ground laws. Is this polarized politically? Is there momentum to perhaps flip this? What's your understanding about the potential perhaps alterations to the stand your ground laws?
No, I think it is becoming political. I think you alluded to it in your previous question, red states versus blue states, and you're seeing now, there is a push to expand or to have stand your ground laws in more places, and you do see. I mean, it's the evidence is there. There is a higher homicide rate when you have stand your ground laws.
I guess when it comes to the castle doctrine, I want to kind of clarify that a bit more because you mentioned that as one of the components within the stand your ground law, and that seems like a stepping stone to a stand your ground law. What exactly is it? How does it work?
Right. So it's a stepping stone could be a word, but they're two separate ideas. The castle doctrine says it's specifically related to your home. You don't have a duty to retreat in your home. The stand your ground laws takes that notion into a public place. So if you're at the grocery store and somebody's threatening you and you can get away, you don't have to under the stand your ground law. You can literally stand there and defend yourself, even using lethal force if you believed your life was in danger. And so some people are saying, look, this is giving people a license to kill. And you see this, they tried to use that with Ahmaud Arbery in Georgia when the three guys essentially were chased. Ahmaud Arbery was running and they tried to use the stand your ground law and they were unsuccessful as it should be because they were literally in their truck chasing him. But they said, we believed our life was in danger. He was trying to steal and all this. And so you're going to see, I think, more people trying to use the stand your ground as we become more trigger happy. I mean, folks are, when you have this sort of fear and paranoia, right, we're getting ready for a 2024 presidential election, and a lot of the rhetoric is about, a lack of safety, lack of border control, other people come, and so this paranoia plus the proliferation of guns on the streets plus the stand your ground laws, it's just a powder keg waiting to happen. We're going to see more homicides, and we're going to see more people using this as a defense.
Well, let me flip it around the other way. Let's make an argument in favor of these stand your ground laws, because if there is an increase in crime, which there's no doubt there has been since the pandemic, there are more guns on the streets and perhaps a bit more of that paranoia that's in place. Could that not also increase the need or want for stand your ground laws, because there is statistical backing for the fact that maybe there is more danger out there, isn't there?
Well, it depends on...
Yeah, I mean, it depends on how you see it. I'm just making a counter-argument here.
Correct, and depending on what state you're in. And that is the argument, is that, hey, there's more bad guys with guns out there, so I should be able to defend myself. But the issue there... So, yes, that is an argument that, hey, I should be able to defend myself,
And to be clear, is that the general argument of... Is that generally the argument that you see from the other side?
Yeah, I think so. And the issue, though, what it comes down to is if the person can safely retreat, Shouldn't they do that? And Stand Your Ground is saying no. Even if they can retreat, this is Second Amendment. You're lawfully carrying a weapon. That's what you could do. So, yeah, that is the argument, and it's promoting this sort of It's consistent with the Second Amendment argument, which is, hey, we have a right. You know, don't regulate, don't touch our guns, and we have a right to defend ourselves no matter where we are.
Is it specifically, when it, defend yourself, is it fear for life, or is it, let's say somebody's threatening to punch you or something like that, physically assault? What is the exact definition there?
Well, and that's a great question, and that's where you're going to get in. Did the person think their life was in danger? And that's a question. Some states say you can only use the amount of force necessary to defend yourself. So sometimes that can't be lethal force. Other states say you can stand your ground, you can use lethal force, even if lethal force is not being used against you. But that becomes a problem, because then it's a question, well, can I defend my property? Can I use lethal force in protecting my property? And some states allow you to do, that's a form of the castle doctrine.
Are there any cases, I'm going to put you on the spot here a little bit, are there any cases heading up to the Supreme Court that could put some of this into jeopardy? And maybe, or put it into a federal, codify this federally?
No, I don't think so. I'm not aware of any sort of federal legislation. And a lot of these gun laws are state to state. So yeah, this is a state thing. 28 states have a Stand Your Ground. 28 states have it codified in statute. 8 states have it in common law, where the courts have said, yes, you can lawfully defend yourself no matter where you are.
It's somewhat surprising to me, considering the fact that there's a pretty conservative Supreme Court that's in place, that there hasn't been a challenge that's gone up, or that is perhaps, as you said, not heading up that way. Would you anticipate one in the next few years?
I wouldn't be surprised. I'm not aware of a case making its way up, but the Supreme Court has ruled on some of these issues, and the Castle Doctrine has been upheld. The Stand Your Ground has been upheld. So, yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if we saw one, but no case is coming to mind that's on the horizon.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Any other final things we should know about Stand Your Ground laws and how they apply to the public?
Well, no. The issue here is you have to know what your state law allows, right? But again, when you have the number of guns, the paranoia, then when you have concealed carry states, I mean, this is really a powder keg. And the argument is, hey, I have a right to defend myself. I'm lawfully carrying. You know, I don't have this duty to retreat. But the problem with that is we're at such a polarized time. Everybody is on edge. Like, we're just resorting to shooting so much more quickly. And if the laws continue to expand that right and give people further rights towards defending themselves and not having a duty to retreat, you're just going to have more shootings. I mean, you know, and the counter argument is I want to defend myself. I have a right to defend myself. But the argument is, yeah, but if you're quick on the trigger and you don't have a duty to retreat, you're just going to see more people shooting and saying, hey, I feared for my life. And it's kind of a shoot first, justify later kind of mentality. So I have some real concerns with the expansion of these laws around the country.
Especially, as you mentioned, with the racial dynamic in play, where there's such a discrepancy between the prosecution of black minority people compared to white people, right?
That's exactly right. And the statistics show that out. And it's problematic because we are so fear-based right now. I mean, there is just, in our politics, in our legislation, everything, there's just a lot of fear right now. And there's a lot of us versus them. And we're all Americans. We're all here together. And the more that we have that feeling, us versus them, with these kind of laws, it's just going to be more violence, I think.
Interesting, and I'm sure we'll hear more about this in the coming weeks and months, and we'll have you back on to discuss it then. But in the meantime, 90s legal expert Whitney Traylor, thanks so much for explaining Stand Your Ground laws, the Castle Doctrine, and how this all plays in. So thank you.
Sure thing. Good to be here.